What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Overreacting for Fun. As always, I am your host, Zach Cronin, and today we are going to be talking about the NBA playoffs because they are here. They have officially arrived. At the time of this recording, the Lakers, Nuggets, Knicks, Sixers, and Cavs Magic series have all played 2 games. Everyone else has played just the first. I understand that 1 game in a playoff series, and sometimes even 2 games in a playoff series, is not enough to make that deep of an analysis because the old adage goes, it's not a playoff series until someone wins on the road. But there are some very intriguing things that we have seen as fans throughout the first couple of games of this postseason. I'm not going to touch on every series, at least I say that, and I'm going to wind up touching on every series because I am verbose and love to hear myself talk. But I won't go in depth on every series. Like, there's no point in me really going on and on about Boston and Miami because really the only thing that sticks out is that Boston won the first game of this series with their best player shooting like 30% from the field. And I understand that Jason Tatum had 10 points and 10 assists, so he was doing other things as well. But the Miami Heat without Jimmy Butler are not really going to pose a significant threat to Boston unless they continue to draw up plays at the end of games that look like they're trying to inflict harm onto the other team. Additionally, a series that has been kind of underwhelming to me so far is Cavs Magic. I said last week in my playoff predictions video that Orlando was going to upset Cleveland. It appears that I'm not going to be correct because Cleveland looks very clearly like the better team. They look like the more experienced team. And I did mention that when talking about the Magic in them being unable to make a deep run because their core has not peaked yet. And I think it's apparent for that. I was kind of being a little silly, but I also really do like this Magic squad. I like how they play. I think the first series that I think the first series I want to go in depth into is Knicks Sixers because this is a strange ass matchup. The Sixers are down 2-0 in this series despite on paper being the better team. There are multiple reasons for this. The first and most apparent being that Joel Embiid is not at 100%. That, I think, has more of an impact on this series than anything else. Even if he is at 75 or 80%, it's going to be a fight to beat this very good Knicks team. Dare I say this great Knicks team. And Embiid, every time he comes down with the rebound, he looks hurt. Every time he jogs back on defense, he looks gassed. He's not playing at 100%. His moves aren't as crisp. He doesn't look as agile, as graceful as he usually does. And despite that, he's still putting up quality numbers. On top of that, Tyrese Maxey has been spectacular. He's averaging like 35 points on 54% shooting. This young man looks every bit the dynamic shot creator that he looked in the regular season, and to nobody's surprise, he just brings that necessary perimeter scoring that Philly does not have. However, Maxey and Embiid are not going to be enough to carry this team. They need help from Tobias Harris and Kelly Oubre, who at this point are looking like James Jones and Rashard Lewis on the Miami Heat. They are a combined 12 of 32 shooting in this series. Buddy Hield hasn't really done anything. The Sixers' third best player has been Kyle Lowry. They look outmatched right now. The end of game 2 was particularly disastrous. The fact that they were unable to get the ball inbounds the fact that they were unable to get the ball inbounds right before Dante DiVincenzo hit that three. Shout out to him, by the way. Huge balls to shoot the go-ahead basket after you had missed the previous one while there was still 15 seconds on the game clock. Shout out to him. I love the confidence. And then additionally, it compounded by them almost not even getting a shot off at the buzzer, just way out of sorts. Of course, we cannot discredit the Knicks in this instance because that type of effort is necessary to win games. Josh Hart's shooting has been huge for them. I don't think anyone can overstate how tremendous Hart's three-point barrage has been, especially considering that Jalen Brunson is playing like he's a freshman at Villanova who didn't even go to college, just went straight to the NBA. This guy's shooting 29% from the field through these two games, missed like 21 shots in game two, and yet the Knicks are in a commanding lead. Of course, they still have to go back to Philadelphia. They still have to win a game on the road, or, well, they don't have to because they have home court. But the effort, this looks like a unit that has bought into everything that Tom Thibodeau has preached, and they understand that they cannot win anything just by leaning on Jalen Brunson, especially because they drew a matchup against Philly, who does have a ton of talent. The other game on TNT last night was Nuggets Lakers, and this was a horrific second half from the Lakers. They were up huge in the first. The offense was rolling. AD looked like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, shot 14 of 15 in the first half. And despite that, Denver was still able to make a comeback and punctuated this victory with Jamal Murray making a very, very difficult shot over Anthony Davis. And I think that this series, in particular, the Nuggets versus the Lakers, this matchup is such a fucking pain in the ass for the Lakers, not because of personnel, because both of these teams match up pretty well against one another. Denver does have better defenders. They do have more length. They are a little bit deeper. Their energy unit brings a lot as well. But one thing I've noticed about these two teams, particularly on offense, is that the Lakers don't run a lot of sets. They run actions to create shots for Anthony Davis. They run actions to create shots for LeBron James, which I'm not saying is a bad game plan, because obviously if you have LeBron and AD, you're going to want them to take as many shots as possible, but they don't really do anything beyond that. It's a lot of matchup hunting. It's a lot of, again, quick actions to open up these isolations. That's not the entirety of their offense, but that's what I've been seeing from them to begin this series. Of course, it doesn't help that Darvin Ham has been getting clowned all year for being a below average coach, and that might be a little generous. You don't force Denver to move on defense. If you're not forcing them to move on defense, they're going to stagnate you, because they have Aaron Gordon, they have Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, they have Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, they have Michael Porter Jr., who, although not a terrific defender, is still a tremendous asset just in terms of his physicals. Nikola Jokic as well looks pretty good on defense this season. I don't think anyone would say otherwise. And on the flip side of that, you have Denver, who runs a very sophisticated offense. Maybe sophisticated isn't the word, but at least in comparison to the Lakers, there's a lot of action. There's a lot of movement from everybody. I don't recall seeing extended periods of time where Denver doesn't have something happening on offense. And then when nothing else works, they, of course, retreat back to the Murray Jokic pick and roll. But that's after they've exhausted all of their options. And even when the sets aren't particularly sophisticated, you're still making the Lakers move around. You're still making them switch. You're making them hedge. You're making the blitz. You're making them actually play defense. And what happens, the more that you force a team to move, to switch, the more likely there is to be a mental lapse. Even with a team like the Lakers, who have LeBron on that team and have Anthony Davis, they're not going to be perfect. And Denver is the type of offense that will beat you on your imperfect defensive possessions. Additionally, at least towards the end of the second half, the Lakers did, a lot to matchup hunting, and you're simply just not going to beat the Denver Nuggets relying on LeBron and AD. Maybe if this was 10 years ago, I'd be saying differently, at least in terms of LeBron, but LeBron is not at that age where he's going to be able to consistently take over games. I mean, he shot 6 of 13 in the second half, but this guy was working hard from tip. He had that one possession where he blocked Jamal Murray's jumper and then converted an and one while being draped by KCP. But that's in the first or second quarter. Like, you're asking a 39-year-old LeBron James to do a lot, and it's the playoffs, and he's going to want to do that. And it helps having Anthony Davis, who can bear an offensive load, where he takes 15 shots in the first half. But they need a legitimate game plan if they want to win this series, and they don't have that, and that's why Denver is such an issue for them, because they're not going to be able to beat Denver on talent. Not only does Denver have the same caliber of talent, they're just an overall better team that runs a better system and has a better head coach. It's really that simple. Until the Lakers bring in a guy who can actually like figure out sets to run on offense, they're not going to beat Denver. They can beat pretty like maybe a couple other teams in the Western Conference just based off of talent, but this is the defending champs. Jokic and Murray are enough to equalize LeBron and AD, and the rest of the supporting cast is going to be better than D'Angelo Russell, who's shooting 39%. And even with all of that said, it's not like the Lakers are getting blown out. They didn't come out that great in the first game. They lost by 11, but this was down to the final possession game 2. That was a very winnable game for the Lakers, and it's because they had figured out something that was working in the first half. However, when you give Michael Malone and the Denver Nuggets a half time to adjust, you're going to have to come out with a different game plan. It's not going to work. Anthony Davis, he wasn't neutralized in the second half, but he was held in check. It was a winnable game for the Lakers, and they squandered it, whether it was the game plan, the fatigue. I think it was a little bit of both. There is, of course, as I mentioned, the overall talent deficit, but I do think that the Lakers have a chance to upset the Nuggets. I just think it is highly unlikely. I'm putting it at probably like 10%. And again, that's just me being biased towards LeBron and Anthony Davis. Another series that I think is really going to be quite entertaining is in the Western Conference, and it is the Pelicans versus the Thunder. That game was probably the best of all the game ones. It was one of 2 games to be decided by single digits. It was the only game 1 to come down to the final possession with SGA hitting that runner to seal it. Well, not to seal it, but to give the Thunder the lead. It was a very shaky performance from both teams, I would say. Definitely some nerves on the Thunder side, I would think. But also, the Pelicans match up incredibly well with the Thunder. The Thunder have a lot of length with Jalen Williams, with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, with Chet Holmgren. But the Pelicans also have a lot of length with Herb Jones, B.I., Trey Murphy, and that length proved to be very disruptive to the Thunder. I mean, it was noticeable. There were no driving lanes, or minimal driving lanes, I should say. When you have all that length, it clogs the passing lanes, which, as we know, the driving kick is huge for what Oklahoma City does. Their three-point shooting wasn't that great in game 1. Additionally, Jonas Valanciunas was a problem on the boards. The Thunder do not have a lot of size. They do not have a lot of girth. They do not have a lot of strength in the front court, and they were out-rebounded on the offensive glass 18-8 in that first game. Of course, I still think that Oklahoma City pulls out this victory, partly because of Zion Williamson being injured, but also because when there is a series like this, when it is a 1-8 matchup, most of the time the 1 seed can skate by on the fact that their best player is better than the best player on the other team, on top of the Thunder also being the better team overall, I would say, and they still have SGA. But I was very surprised with how competitive the Pelicans looked. It was a grimy, a gritty, a grungy basketball game, and the Thunder were able to slow it down and play that way, which was also equally as impressive. I do think the Pelicans have the chance to push it to 6 or 7 games. I don't know if they have enough to pull off the upset. There's going to be one of these games that comes down to scoring points, and is that game going to be one of the games where Trey Murphy has another hot night from 3? It's entirely possible. I mean, the Pelicans are in the playoffs because they beat the Kings to get here, and they lost to the Lakers, but still they deserve to be here. They proved that they deserved to be here. It really does suck that Zion is not going to be participating in this series. At least I don't think he's going to be participating in this series because I think he would just add an extra level of excitement. And on top of that, again, he would fit in perfectly with what New Orleans is already doing. That was a spectacular game one and could very well shape up to be the most entertaining matchup of the first round. And with the final little blurb, I want to talk about the Phoenix Suns and the Minnesota Timberwolves because my God, what a performance it was. What a tone setter from Minnesota. I was pleasantly surprised. I picked Minnesota in this series because I don't think the Suns have an identity. And if you don't have an identity, you are going to get hornswoggled in the playoffs. But they didn't just get hornswoggled, Phoenix did. They got swashbuckled. To get beat by 25 when Kevin Durant gives you 31 on 11 of 17 shooting is a crime. Bradley Beal, Devin Booker need to be tried in an international court for leaving this man, Kevin Durant, on an island with no food, no water, no help, no supplies, no nothing. This was an issue that I foresaw with Phoenix. Their roster composition is just not that great. They mortgaged a lot to get Bradley Beal, and so far he has effectively been not a nothing burger. He scored 15, shot 6 of 10, but this guy got as many shot attempts as Royce O'Neal in that game. That's a fucking metric, man. Oh my God. You look at Minnesota, who is a dominant team on defense, obviously, with Rudy Gobert. They have Karl Anthony Towns as well, who in limited time looked all right, considering he's also coming back from a knee injury. But Anthony Edwards, I made a TikTok about this guy. There's a lot of discussion about the face of the league for the future because LeBron's getting old, Steph's getting old, KD's getting old, and there is a race between guys like Jokic, Luka, we could say Ja when he's on the court, we could say Jason Tatum, we could say Anthony Edwards. I don't know if Anthony Edwards will ever be considered the face of the league, but this guy is a much needed asset for the NBA. Without trying to regurgitate what I said in the TikTok, Anthony Edwards is one of those guys who has not only exciting game, but an exciting personality. Somebody like Kevin Garnett. I think Kevin Garnett is probably the most apt example. I was also talking about Gary Payton, but I think KG was a bigger superstar than GP was. If I'm underestimating Gary Payton's impact on the league, I apologize. I wasn't alive to experience it. But KG was just a fucking demon. And Anthony Edwards is the same thing. He will trash talk your entire bloodline after dunking on you. And it's not like he's a nobody. Like, this dude put 33 and was talking trash to Kevin Durant. What we should embrace that, especially at a time when we do have the more silent superstars like Luka and Jokic. Beyond that, Edwards in this game was phenomenal. This guy is a bona fide superstar. I don't think there's anyone who can at this point dismiss it. To come out in game one against the Phoenix Suns and shoot 14 of 24, have 33 points, 9 boards, 6 assists. He's fucking insane. Additionally, they got a much needed boost from Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who had 18. Alexander Walker is going to be huge because the Suns offense does have the Wolves offense does have a tendency to stagnate as the game goes on. I've seen bits and pieces of them this year where they don't really know how to act in the fourth quarter, and it's because they don't have a secondary perimeter playmaker, whether it's a scorer, whether it's passing, whatever. And I don't know if Nickeil Alexander-Walker is that guy, but if he's a guy who's going to make 4 of 9 threes and give you 18, that opens up so much for Edwards to make plays. That opens up so much for Towns to make plays. That opens up so much for Mike Conley as well, who could have been that secondary playmaker they needed if he weren't 36. His age is a factor. He still can get it done. He had 7 assists in this game. He led the team in assists, but he is still 36 years old. Like, he's not going to be able to do that all the time. But that additional support from Alexander Walker takes Minnesota to being a legitimate championship contender. Their offense for me was the one thing that I was skeptical on because I understand you have Ant and you have Towns, but those guys have to work together along with Mike Conley, along with Rudy Gobert and Naz Reid and now Nickeil Alexander Walker. Additionally, we have to clown on Phoenix a little bit. I love giving out praise when I do these videos, but sometimes when you let out a wet fart on the basketball court, you need to be criticized for it. Devin Booker, that is simply unacceptable. Not only is it unacceptable, it's unexpected. Maybe it has to do with like the layoffs or like the time in between the end of the regular season, the start of the postseason. Some guys aren't, or some teams, I don't know how they do their practices or whatever. I will say that the teams that were in the play, and particularly New Orleans, I do think that is a little bit of a benefit to them because they're already in rhythm and they don't have 5, 6, 7 days off like the Thunder did, I believe. But what the fuck? I'm struggling to understand how Devin Booker can go from leading the playoffs in scoring last year to putting up 18 on 5 of 16 this year. It is only one game, so I'm not going to overreact too much. I'm not going to say that he's washed. I'm not going to post that picture of him getting the Jeff Van Gundy special. I don't expect him to play like this for the rest of the series. Game 2 of this series is Tuesday night, the night on which I am recording this, and I do expect to see a better version of Devin Booker, but I do think that there is a little bit of these struggles tied into the fact that Phoenix doesn't have a game plan. They don't know what to do on the basketball court. Like, they literally do not know what to do with their hands because this was just an attempt to unorganically build a super team, a big three, when teams have proven that you don't need a big three to win. You don't. The Denver Nuggets won with a super duper star in Nikola Jokic and a star in Jamal Murray and a very, very good team around them. Phoenix decided to give that up, and I think that will ultimately be their downfall. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and close this video. I thank you guys so very much for coming to hang out with me today. As always, everything that I'm associated with is down in the description box below. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Subscribe to the channel. Leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it. Drop a comment as well. It really helps out with the algorithm. If you do any of those 3 things, you will become my new favorite person. And with that, I will catch y'all in the next one.